friends, welcome back to this week's episode of Marriage is Hard But Worth It, where we talk real marriages, real faith, and real growth. I'm Kaylyn.
And I'm Steve. We're diving into a topic that is a pretty big one, something that hits close to home for a lot of couples. We're talking about keeping the D word, divorce, out of your marriage.
Yeah, and in today's culture, people treat marriage like it's, disposable. If it gets hard, they want to give in, or when they have the wrong sports team, they're like, I can't do this.
FYI, the Chargers are playing the Steelers tonight on Sunday Night Football. So the D word that is acceptable tonight is divided.
However, this is the only thing we're divided on when it comes to our marriage. We are definitely one team.
Correct.
And, that's how God designed your marriage.
Correct. It is a covenant. It's not a contract. It's not something you can walk away from when it gets uncomfortable. It's something you fight for when times get tough.
Malachi 2:16 tells us that why did I lose it? For a man who does not love his wife but divorces her, God hates that. So while God doesn't hate you because you've been divorced, he hates the action of divorce. Now, we both understand, having been married before, that there are certain circumstances where, divorce just is the inevitable end. However, we try not to have that as the very...
Correct. I mean, as believers, you're definitely not wanting to disappoint God or have God disapprove of you, but obviously everybody's going to fall short of the glory of God, and that's one of the aspects where a lot of people are going to fall short.
Yeah, and we get it. There's things like you were abandoned by your spouse, and that abandonment can mean a couple different things. It can mean they walked out on you. It can mean that they don't want to walk in the same line that you want to when it comes to walking with God. Mm-hmm. Because that's the biggest thing, is you need a spouse that is going to walk that same line with you, because the end of the day, the ultimate goal is to get to heaven. Correct.
And just to piggyback off of what we were talking about last week, this is a 3-chord binding. It is you, your spouse, and God. Mm-hmm. Matthew 9:16 says, so they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man separate.
And when they mean no one, that includes the devil, because the devil hates marriage.
Correct. It is God's strongest unity, and that is what he goes about to try to destroy.
So, and words carry a lot of power. When you start using divorce as a weapon in arguments, which a lot of people do, is, well, if you don't do this, we're going to get a divorce.
Or even throwing the word around in a joking manner.
Yeah.
Even though you do, obviously both of you understand that it's a joke. Mm-hmm. Even throwing the word around, it's not a word that should be thrown around in marriage lightly.
No, because once the devil hears you even joking about divorce, he's like, ooh, I have a toe in. And
correct.
Proverbs 18:21 tells us that, the tongue is the power of life or death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. So, I know when we got married, or even before we got married, we talked about divorce wasn't an option.
No.
It was, if you're mad,
go sleep on the couch and we'll try again tomorrow.
Or, you go play golf and I'm going to spend time with my sisters and we'll reconvene later. But
correct. And that's the other part about it too, is once somebody gets the D word convinced in their mind as an option, it becomes an escape route. Mm-hmm. So the second that seed is planted, as soon as something gets hard, you're like, well, this is an option, when it should not be an option brought up in a marriage at all, unless it's under the most extreme of circumstances.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I fell prey to that there last month, and we walked away from it, and we made our bathroom smell like a bonfire for a couple days, but I fell prey to it, and I had to go back and I had to pray that, God took that out of my vocabulary again, because we're in this together. We didn't take those vows in Vegas in front of our friends and some
Chubby
of our
Rob
family.
Schneider.
And still my favorite. Just for shoots and giggles, like
right, and that's the thing is there's no marriage that is impervious to thinking this way.
No.
That is why we're bringing it up so early in this podcast and in this series, because in the grand scheme of things, we do all right. We only have a blow up fight every 5 years or so.
Yeah.
You would think that that's a massive win.
Yeah. Now the last blow up, divorce didn't come up in that one. This one, it did on my end, but again, that's because I let the devil come in and I let him play, and I let you believe that everything was okay, and it was nowhere near okay. But that's where having those hard conversations with your spouse is important.
Right. Communication is key.
And
it's not just a catchphrase.
No. And we both struggle with past traumas of relationships and not feeling like we can communicate even though we know better.
Correct. And marriage isn't easy.
No.
There's going to be disagreements, disappointments, growing pains, but the covenant of love says, I'm staying even when I don't feel like it. Mm-hmm. One of the jokes that we pass around our entire family is, I love you, but I don't really like you right now.
Yeah. And when I was a kid, I used to hate when my mom would tell me that. Like, I love you, but I don't like you right now. And I didn't understand it until, I don't know, last 5 or so years. And
pretty recently.
Yeah, because I've had to cut out family members that I love, but they didn't walk down the same path that I did. And I'm not saying that everybody has to have the same views that we do, because we know that that's not true, but their views were so skewed that it didn't fit with what we were trying to do for us and our family.
Yeah. And it's not just family that you got to cut out. I've cut out friends who are into things that I'm just not into anymore, and I look at that scenario as an open invitation for temptation, and I choose to stay away from it.
Yeah.
Alcohol being the biggest one of those. I've battled alcoholism twice, and I've cut friends out who refuse to stop indulging in that. And if I'm around them, it's just temptation to go about it again.
And it's not even that they won't quit indulging, it's that they don't support the decision that you've made to stop drinking. And that's where Hebrews 13:4 comes in. It says, let your marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterous. Now, we touched on this verse last week, but you have to protect your marriage at all costs by keeping out the things that are going to defile that.
Correct.
And whether that's the physicality of sexual immorality or adultery, whether that's the emotional side of it, or it's letting your friends who don't have the same views that you do, because when you have those friends or even family that look at marriage as just a piece of paper, it kind of makes it hard.
Correct. And it's all about both spouses being committed to growth, forgiveness, and grace. Divorce isn't a get out of jail free option.
No.
And by the way, in case you didn't know, it's definitely not free.
Definitely not. And some divorces get really messy. And we got lucky with both of ours.
Yes.
They were easy.
Well, yours didn't really have much of a choice but to be easy.
That is very true. When you decide to be a geo-bachelor and you have your legal spouse in one state and the other one that thinks that they're your legal spouse in another state, it makes it a little easy. And thanks Uncle Sam for paying for my divorce.
Yeah. But there are a lot of practical ways to remove the D word from your conversations.
And the first one, we've already touched on, is agreeing that divorce is off the table.
Mm-hmm.
Set those boundaries and that commitment that when you get ready to walk down the aisle, that you have a solid plan in place as to what's going to happen when those arguments come up. Because while we don't really argue, we do have moments where we disagree with each other. Because he's strong, we're both stubborn and hard-headed. No, I'm not.
Yeah, okay.
I think I'm the most stubborn one here.
See, and this leads to the next one: resolve conflict with prayer. Mm-hmm. I have understood this a little more as I've grown older and wiser, and yes, you do get wiser as you get older.
Sometimes.
I used to hate being in a conversation with somebody and I'm talking about problems and the answer is just, oh, you just got to pray about it. Because I never thought that would actually give me an answer. I thought it was, hey, I'm uncomfortable with this topic and this is the easiest way to stop this conversation is just to recommend you go pray about it. However, it is actually a legit option to, not just for you, but for the couple to go to Christ with problems, because it's a three-chorded relationship.
And not even necessarily option, I don't think is the right word, but going to God in prayer, because God tells us to come to him in prayer for everything. So when you have that conflict, instead of going to your friends or your family, not saying that you can't go be like, hey, this is where I'm at. Can you help me come up with a solution? Turn to God first. And that's where I fell short. Mm-hmm. I didn't go to God first. I just went instantly to his ex-wife and was like, hey, this is what I'm planning. Can you make sure that I'm not out of the kids' lives? Like, I wasn't worried about anything but still being in their lives.
Right. Well, and that's the other thing, too, is that lack of communication, because when we finally started opening up and talking about it, you're like, when's the last time you've prayed? I'm like, I pray almost every morning, and usually you're the topic.
Mm-hmm. And that hit hard because, I hadn't been praying. I hadn't been asking God to watch over our marriage and watch over you. And that's selfish on my end, because I was just worried about me and my feelings at the time. I didn't care about you at the time. And I say that I do care. But I was being selfish. I was more worried about the kids and not upending their life again as drastically as what my brain was telling me to do.
And this leads into the mental switch that we made.
Of seeking help early.
Well, not necessarily that, but replacing our language and how we speak about it, mm-hmm. and replacing I'm done with we're going to work our way through this.
Yep. Which is what led to this.
You're welcome.
Thank you, God. And seeking help early. And I know that there have been times where I've talked about, let's go get some counseling or talk to our pastor, and I've been met with a stone brick wall, but
there was a reason for that, because most of the guidance that you do seek, they like to bring up past things, mm-hmm. and try to resolve past things, and you wind up walking out of a counselor's office more mad at each other than when you walked in.
And at the time when this was going down, we didn't have a home church, so we didn't feel like we had somebody to turn to. And the one person that we would have turned to, fortunately, God called home back in 2020, and,
mm-hmm. Well, and that's the other thing, is we also set some guidelines and some rules for ourselves, which, mm-hmm. We used to be really bad about when we got upset about something, either that we did or they did, the other did to the other. It'd be buried and it would just grow, and the resentment would grow and fester, and the irrational thoughts become rational. And
oh yeah, and sometimes those irrational thoughts have stopped us from doing things. I mean, the
Yeah.
last time you had it prior to this was when I was in Atlanta, and you know, I had chose to be a part of a very big deal at the time.
Yeah, very big deal.
With Diamond Dallas Page and his workout program. Shout out DDP.
What a boss.
And we weren't in a bad spot.
No, it was just something that from my past that I thought I had dealt with that apparently I hadn't. And it triggered a full-blown mental breakdown.
Well, and it was part of your past that you hadn't dealt with knowing my history of what branch of the military I was in and
the circumstances
and the men and boys that I dated when I was in the military.
Correct.
You know, while the pictures were completely and utterly innocent, mind you, you know, it triggered something in you, and you called me, and luckily I had just finished filming a workout so I could answer my phone, and I was ready to jump on a plane and come home so we could figure out what was going on in that irrational side of your brain.
But what we have more recently suggested that we do, which I wholeheartedly recommend for everybody to practice this when at all possible. If you feel something, address it right away.
Yeah.
That way it can be addressed and it can be fixed before it can fester and those irrational thoughts become rational.
And
if there's something that's going on, bring it up, discuss it, and fix it.
And before you do that, you go to God in prayer and be like, you know, I'm really struggling that my spouse is going out with her single friends all the time, or I'm struggling with my spouse is overspending money, because we all know that finances can overtake a marriage sometimes, because you've got one person who's super frugal or one person who likes to spend a lot of money and doesn't really pay attention to what's in the bank account. It's my ADHD brain, but no, that's not an excuse. So you go to God in prayer and be like, you know, I'm struggling with this. How do I approach my spouse with that? And then always remember why you got married.
Yeah.
You know, because that 3-quarter covenant that you made with God is super uber duper sacred. And it's not to be taken lightly. God doesn't take promises lightly.
Correct. Ephesians 4 verses 2 and 3. Be completely humble and gentle, be patient, be bearing with one another in love, make every effort to keep the unity through the Spirit and the bond of peace.
You know, because that's how God, you know, when God joined us together, that's what he wants us to have, is patience, humility, and love. And the big one being patience. And do I struggle with patience a lot.
Yeah, well, I mean, patience is a virtue that not everybody has sometimes.
Nope. And I struggle with that a lot. But in today's world, like we said last week, you know, first marriages, the average statistic is 39 to 42%, you know, and that's a large number. And I looked even further into it, and second marriages are at 60%, and third marriages are 70
and over.
Yeah, and so just because you didn't get it right the first time doesn't always mean you're going to get it right the second, the third,
fourth, fifth.
Now we got lucky. You know, our second go around of this, we're making a go of it, and
got that right.
We refuse to be a part of that statistic. And now again, we know that there are circumstances that are unavoidable.
Correct.
I mean, we're not, you know, rose-colored glasses, you know, everything's all hunky-dory and, you know.
But, you know, 1 Corinthians 13:7 reminds us that love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things.
1 Corinthians 13 is his favorite book in the Bible.
It's overused at weddings. I will die on that hill.
And most of the time improperly used. Because, you know.
Love is patient. Love is kind.
And it's true. It is all those things. But
it doesn't need to be at every wedding I've attended throughout my life.
No, and I agree. And I'm not saying that if you had it in your wedding, we're not saying that you're wrong. That was your choice. That just wasn't our choice when we got married. So, you know, you got to just make sure that, you know, when you remove the divorce word from your vocabulary, you leave more room for that healing and that grace and the growth that God intends for you to have. So instead of, you know, telling your spouse, well, if you don't get this together, I'm leaving, or if you don't do this, we're getting a divorce, start fighting for what you have, because that's what God wants for us to do. If
more people put as much effort in staying as they do leaving, that marriage statistic would be a whole lot better.
Because I'm pretty sure our grandparents had a saying that if it ain't broke,
don't fix it.
Don't fix it. You know, so just because your marriage may be broken because you have a spouse who doesn't want to work with you, that doesn't mean that you can't find avenues. And if you have to go to counseling by yourself, go to counseling by yourself, because if you can fix what you're broken, then, you know, it'll help you.
Two broken things can't fix each other.
No, even though you tried. And you did a very good job.
Hey.
Because I was definitely super broken 10 years ago. But that's a topic for later down the road. When we talk about bringing in trauma from past relationships.
Yep.
So, again, we know that we live in a society where it's easier just to throw it away than to fix it. But that's not what God intended for it.
Correct.
So, we thank you guys for joining us in Marriage is Hard But Worth It. And we pray that this conversation that we had with you guys this week will help you to guard your marriage and speak life into it and keep
your
that
covenant strong.
3-quarter covenant strong. Tune in with us next week where we talk about in your marriage, it's not about who's right, but who's willing to grow. And we kind of had that little tiff before we started recording.
Yes.
Because I was like, I'm right.
Do you want to be right or do you want to grow?
I'm right this time, okay? All right. Have a good night, everybody.